Thick translation, Gami Anthony Appiah. So let's get started. He was born in 1954 and grew up in Ghana. He is a Ghanaian British American philosopher, cultural theorist, and novelist. He also given the lectures in a number of universities, researched philosophy of language and also mind, and African intellectual history. He currently holds the position of Lawrence S. Rockefeller University Professor of Philosophy at Princeton University. So let's get started to take translation. So the theory of meaning. Trying to find an adequate theoretical account of the meaning of the words, phrases and sentences. Definition of the meaning by Aristotle, Augustine and Aquinas. They give the definition that a relationship between the signs and the kind of things they mean, whether intended, expressed or signified. So what did Appiah's researchers say? They say that what is communicated by the Grecian mechanism through utterances applied to both literal and literary translation. He also tries to discover how translation can overshadow the Grecian aspects of meaning. So, what was the conclusion? What is actually the thick translation? We will discuss the Grecian mechanism. So what is Grecian mechanism? The Grecian mechanism is the act that archives its purposes because its purpose is recognized. A speaker has two intentions when expressing an utterance. Firstly, that this is the belief he intends the hearer to have, and secondly, that he intends the hearer to have the belief due to the recognition of that primary intention. The meaning of a rhetoric utterance and can be identified through the content of the belief that it was conventionally intended to produce. So let's get started to the Grecian mechanism. Appiah tried to demonstrate how translation and theorizing about meaning can be naturally connected, as translation essentially finds the way of saying in one language something that means the same as what has been said in another. Translation of utterances by Paul Grace. That the reasons are actually the products of actions and the products of actions are actually the utterances. So there are two types of utterances. The first one is acertoric utterances and the second one is unusual utterances. Acertoric utterances are actually motivated by a desire to express a specific thought, consequently making the hearer assume a meaning, even though the full account might not be understood. And the usual utterances occur within odd circumstances. The utterance might not be true. So what are the language conventions? Words are assigned rules according to the situations, as we all know. So these conventions are necessary for the communication to occur to determine the belief to be communicated in an utterance when processed through the Grecian mechanism, both in conventional and unconventional circumstances. Conventional maxims. They are actually utilized conventionally by speakers to indicate whether an utterance is informative, relevant, communicatively, orderly, and most of all, truthful. So conversational implication, we will try to discuss what is this. It is actually when hearers draw conclusions from the implied message within the utterance beyond what the speaker expressed. As we know that learning a language is a grammar and lexicon, it is very crucial as they are considered to be a set of guidelines which generate acts intended to have an impact on others who are acquainted with them. So What are the literal intentions? It is actually being able to identify those intentions is to know the literal meaning of what is uttered. Literal intentions can be, the meaning of words and phrases as determined by the way in which they contribute to fixing the intentions associated with the speech acts in which they occur. They define the role of literal as rhetoric utterance, that is to communicate particular information. Even to most of the time, an utterance will be surrounded and motivated by more than its literal intentions. Literal translations. A literal translation aims to produce the same intentions found in the original text. Certain circumstances do require linguistic knowledge, but for the basic statements like it's a cat can be taught without knowing English. Most of the time, it's a matter of luck whether the intentions found in language can be literally translated into another. Literal intentions are crucial to distinguish between direct and indirect speech acts as stated by the Shirley. A direct speech act takes place when the main point of the utterance is explained through the literal intentions, while an indirect speech act communicates indirectly through implications. So, we have learned what is Grecian mechanism and what is Shirley's distinction. Now, the Grecian mechanism and Shirley's distinction together make the thick translation. They produce an appropriate type of translation type able to translate metaphors and proverbs, texts which might hide its primary meaning. Indirect communication might still proceed by the way of literal intentions which could be expressed through the translation with the availability of the relevant literal intentions as told by Pia. What are metaphors and proverbs? They could work in Grecian mechanism. How? A metaphor has a double meaning, as we all know, a figurative part and a literal part. The reader or the hearer sees how the metaphor is supposed to work and recognizes that that is how the speaker intended him to understand it. Translation can overshadow Grecian aspects of meaning. What is the solution to that? Let's say, try to deduce the author's intentions when writing his text. It might still be irrelevant due to the author being deceased or unknown, and most probably his or her ideas might not be of interest to the reader. It's important to have a good understanding of the text language in order to distinguish the conventional intentions of each sentence, starting with the word's literal meaning, subsequently acquiring a literal understanding. Both linguistic and literal practices are conventional. They're regulated by a specific structure of mutual expectations. What is literary translation? Literary practices do not construct a meaning. Therefore, they don't recourse to the Grecian mechanism. Literary conventions make possible acts that can be defined by the reference to the feature that are broadly formal. Literary works do not have literary intentions, conventional and Grecian, to correspond to literal intentions in order to understand what the work means. The aim of translating a literary text is not to reproduce the literal intentions of the author, but to create a text which shares the central literary properties of the source text. It aims to preserve the relation between the text and the literary linguistic conventions with their respective cultures. The text can't have full equivalence in order to maintain formal features of the text. A perfect translation is a myth. There is no definite set of conventions or intentions. Its main aim is to reproduce a text which mattered in one community the way it mattered to another. And this understanding can be settled through conventions, but with our literary judgment. A good literary translation can be achieved by preserving the features which make it worth teaching, a work which aims itself to be a literary work. Now that is all for the lecture. Now let's come to the conclusion. Thick translation aims to be used in literary teaching and seeks to locate the text in a rich cultural and linguistic text. Thanks to its annotations and accompanying glosses, they create a need for the literary teaching as readers are faced with a translation which drawn on from the rich description of the context, a sort of understanding which challenges them to inquire about other cultures and instill respect and tolerance for the others. So in conclusion, translation should be context dependent, so to understand the culture, conventions, customs and features of the source culture, and which will ultimately help the reader to understand the truth in the words. So ladies and gentlemen, that is all for the lecture about the thick translation. Thank you.